Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Okay, we're live again with another episode of the Quit List. We thank you guys for tuning in. You guys are pretty amazing. We love you. We want you to go ahead and share. So go ahead and share with everybody you know. We know that those people will thank you for it. Today, I'm joined on the show by my guest, Pastor Ernest Gray. Pastor Gray is the senior pastor at Keystone Baptist Church, and he is a former professor of Bible at Moody Bible Institute. Pastor Gray, welcome to the program.
Hey, appreciate you having me on. I enjoy chopping it up in these days. I find myself kind of sharing my thoughts far and wide, and I'm appreciative to be included in this convo.
Excellent. We're also joined today by Jeremiah Kamara. Jeremiah is a filmmaker and an author. Jeremiah, welcome back to the Quit List.
Always good to be here, Brother Stanley. Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Charles Butler, the conservative talk show host, who is nothing short of extraordinary. Mr. Butler, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Issue number one on
Yes,
the
sir.
Quit List. Saturday Night Live. Attorney General Daniel Cameron has taken offense to Megan Thee Stallion's performance on Saturday Night Live after she blasted him for how he handled the Breonna Taylor case. There were leaks about the evidence presented to the grand jury, and he was also forced by a judge to release the recordings of the proceedings. In addition to that, the grand jury took an extraordinary step when they made a motion to allow the jurors to speak publicly about the charges in the case. One of the attorneys said, "I was hopeful that whatever the grand jury decided, that the people on every side of the matter would have confidence that things would be done correctly and they would move forward as a community." I'm going to come down here to Mr. Charles Butler on this particular issue. When this attorney says that he thinks that the community should have just moved forward on the issue, do you believe that? I mean, is that what do you think of that? Do you think that the people should just move on in the Breonna Taylor case, or is protest still valid?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in protests, and I think that these people need to file lawsuits. Having been combat trained, been in combat, what bothers me is that when these men broke into the apartment, they didn't continue to shoot at the person who was shooting at them. They shot at a young girl running down the hall for her life. That's what bothers me. That there is no excuse for these men shooting this woman in the back. I don't know what justification the grand jury came to or the AG, but generally when an AG presents evidence to a grand jury, it's a done deal because the books are always cooked in the attorney general's favor so that they can indict. I've rarely seen any situation like that. And it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing.
So you had a problem with the grand jury's findings?
Totally, totally not a problem. It's very disturbing. It needs to be taken to the Department of Justice.
Okay. Now, one other thing you said, I'd like to ask you a little bit about that. You said that you have a problem with protesting. Could you elaborate on that for a minute?
Well, I don't think that protests really accomplish much. You know, the bottom line is the battles are fought in court. If you look historically, while the media always glamorizes these protest marches and whatever, that they accomplish the civil rights laws and all, it's just the laws were already making their way through Congress, and we'd had laws before they had gone through Congress. But because history is told the way that it is, it's like the March on Washington. As I'm writing my book, the March on Washington was scripted and funded and controlled by the Kennedys. People don't even know that, but there's documentation today that certainly talks about that. In fact, several of the organizers of the March on Washington, participants, were good friends of mine and my family, and they told me these stories that I couldn't find the information to because they weren't in the books. You couldn't get access to that information today. It's true, but that's just one aside. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Pastor Gray, what do you think about the idea that the grand jury did not indict the police officers, and the Attorney General said that he didn't do it because it was his job to protect the policeman from any harm and not to protect Breonna Taylor. What do you make of that?
I think it's more of the same. You know, we live in a world right now where officers have so much bolstering by the law, the courts, the books, the laws that are on the books right now can allow a police officer to shoot first with impunity and then ask questions later if they are to ask questions at all. I find that appalling, because when you think about the reality of how disproportionately people of color with implicit bias are targeted, murdered, shot, then it's already seeming to me that our books need to be rewritten, our laws need to be redone, they need to be reformed. They've got to be reformed, because if we don't, then we already know that the original Constitution doesn't already make concession for people of color, call us 3/5 of a human, and so on and so forth. So I find it, I'm not surprised, but I'm also very much so disheartened by the reality that even with the entire infrastructure of a judicial system that is weighted towards the police force that is inherently biased and has difficulties coming to terms in policing their own, then I know that there's really nothing more than we can do. It seems to me that this is just a exercise in frustration on all sides. And I think that that's essentially what we see playing out. Now, about the whole protesting thing, I may take a different take. I think that sometimes leveraging voice and calling out, crying out is something that I resonate with, because I see in the Bible as I read it, I understand it to be one of the ways in which we get the attention and continue to speak up for the oppressed, the widow, the orphan, and that's what I'm called to do. So,
what do you say about that, Jeremiah? And just in terms of the protest aspect, good or bad?
Well, I have to agree with Charles Butler on that. I know that a lot of the protests, they are cherry picked by the media. The media sensationalizes them. Martin Luther King once said that protesting is the voice of the unheard. And the unheard is in the situation that they're in because of the economic situation that they're in. So if you're unheard, you have to do these types of things. But I'm not quite clear how protesting is changing much. I'm sure it might change some things, but we protested in the 60s, we protested in the 70s, we've marched in the 80s, we've marched in the 90s. Here we are, 2020. We're doing the same thing. We're going to have a different approach to all of that. And, that seems like that's the first thing that we do is to protest. But I'm not surprised at the decision. When you ask many of the athletes what they thought about the Breonna Taylor case, they all said the same thing. We're not surprised. We're in a systemic situation here where all that is tied to things that happened all the way back to Virginia, and it's embedded within the whole consciousness and fabric of this country. This is what we're dealing with. This is what we're faced with. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure about if marching is the proper solution. I guess it does have some merit. I can't discredit it all, but I think we just have worn out the soles of our heels to the degree where I just don't see it has helped much. So I'd have to agree with Charles Butler to that degree.
Hey, Charles, what do you think about?
You could march till you wear out the soles of your heels, but you cannot legislate how people feel about you. You cannot legislate how people think about you. So
yeah.
And Dr. King,
go ahead, Pastor Gray.
Yeah, I'm curious. How are we going to marshal enough angst in our society to get? I know that. Indeed, I agree with both of you. I mean, I just know that in my generation, I don't mind wearing my leather on my shoes so much. So nowadays, I mean, my story is unique. I don't have time to get into a lot of my own personal story, but I think that I'm in a place now in my life where I don't mind wearing out the leather. My question is, how do we marshal enough involvement, grassroots, to help push the courts so that we can effect policy change or making some amendments to laws that are already inherently biased? That's what I'm curious to see. I'm about solutions based, because I know that calling attention is one thing, but getting it pressed into, or to get it embossed into a piece of paper is another.
I agree.
Okay.
I mean, you look at reparations. Reparations is a political thing. It's not a law.
Yeah.
It's a political thing that we could go forward with, but we don't. And we're going to be in that situation unless we
you can't go
have
forward with reparations. You're right. Reparations is a political thing. You can't go forward with that unless the legislators actually put a bill in to put that into legislation. So you're right about that. That's not going to happen unless the legislators move on it, which is a whole nother issue that we may talk about in the future. One thing, Charles, I want to ask you this real quick. One of the things that the Attorney General said is that the only reason that this rapper, the young lady Megan, the only reason that she targeted him was because he is a Black Republican. Do you buy that?
No, I don't.
What do you think? What do you think her point was?
Well, I was playing the clip actually when Jeremiah was teasing me about my own interest music. That was the clip from Saturday Night Live. I was listening to it, and I played it on my show. And the thing is, she can say that. She can say what she wants to say. Like, she basically said that he was like the Black folks who sold us out into slavery. And, so what? Who cares? I mean, in my opinion, I was always told, consider the source. When I was coming through elementary school, junior high school, people called me an Uncle Tom and all these other things. And I used to tell these Negroes, I was an all-state football player. I became a Navy aviator. I've been around the world. I've worked for a number of corporations and done a number of things I could never have dreamt of doing growing up in Pontiac, Michigan, laying on my lawn, looking up in the sky, thinking I want to fly and becoming an actual aviator. I always consider the source. And so I never really put a lot of credibility with people who criticize me. Like one of my buddies used to, I'm a skier. I've skied since high school. I was on a high school ski team. And the guy said, Black folks don't ski. What?
Yeah. Well, see, let me tell you.
Pictures all the time. I was into photography, heavy into photography.
Yeah.
A lot of Canon equipment I bought in Japan, and Nike equipment I bought in Japan when I was in service. And this guy was like, hey, man, Black people don't take pictures. They're not into photography. You're in this white boy stuff. Black people don't scuba dive. I did. I mean, I did all these things. So what? That's who I am. I could care less what other and somebody was talking about what Black people need to do to create the angst. And let me say this about that. They need to be personally responsible. All of these welfare programs, what you need to do is be out in the community telling these little girls, stop having these damn babies until you get married, until you get a skill, until you get a trade. Don't go out here having these babies that you can't take care of because you can't take care of yourself. That's what we need to be talking about.
Well, let me say this.
72% of Black children are born into out of wedlock, and it's unconscionable. They never have a leg up, and their parents. I had young girls, 25, 26 years old in college, and their parents tell me, when you gonna have a baby? And these girls, this is not one or two girls, this is like 10, 11 girls I'm talking about, these young women who are trying to do something with their life. When you gonna have a baby? Where did this stuff come from? This wasn't, when I came along, you were ostracized if you got pregnant and you didn't have a man or a father in your life. Or in your,
okay, we've got about 1 or 2 minutes left on this particular topic. Jeremiah, say what you want to say, and give us the short version, 30 seconds. And I see Pastor Gray shaking his head there. I want to find out what he's got to say. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Well, the short version, I'm perplexed. I mean, you had Malcolm X coming in a narrative during the song and saying, why do you hate yourself? And talking about image, and yet you had a woman who is not necessarily a healthy image for Black people. I mean, you got lyrics say, I've got a stank blank walk and a reckless blank mouth, and my blank so tight, when I blank, my blank talk. I mean, so, and from I didn't even know who she was. And when I pulled her up, everything I saw was her ass shaking and twerking all day long. And yet you want to be critical. It starts at home. It starts with you. Who are you at 25 years old, shaking your butt all around the country to give any type of advice of what's best for black people? If is the attorney general the problem, or is what you're doing the problem? You gotta assess yourself from the inside and work your way out.
Let me say this. I think Daniel Cameron and she, both of them are in a similar boat, because I don't know if we know exactly what or how to be a voice for a collective. I don't know if, I think about the realities of the king of what was going with Rosa Parks. She was handpicked, right? She was the one that she had the credibility, she had the character, she had what she needed to do in order to bring about to be the person. And I don't know. I do appreciate some of our people, but some of our celebrities, they ain't, this ain't your lane. You might need to sit this one out.
Exactly.
So in essence, whereas because it muffles the message. And if that's the case, then maybe there does need to be some searching for Daniel Cameron. Maybe he's too big of a job for not enough maturity in that position and or understanding. At 34 years old, I don't know, man. I'm 42, and I'm now leaning into some of this stuff that I know how deep-seated it is with regard to Western civilization.
Pastor Gray.
She's 25 years old and dresses. I've never seen her where it wasn't provocative. So I'm just saying, who is she that we should listen to and take heed to?
Exactly. She has a platform and she's selling records, but that doesn't necessarily make her right.
Exactly.
And we can do another segment on this at some other time, but the Black Lives Matter Foundation has the same problem. Those are two lesbians and a transgender that's trying to lead. They're talking about lesbianism and transgenderism, and we out here talking about Black Lives Matter. My Black Lives Matter is totally different than their Black Lives Matter.
I can do it. I can parse it. I can parse that. I can parse that because I know.
Chill for a minute. We had to wrap this topic up. I think I would love to come back and talk about a comment that Charles Butler just made in terms of Black Lives Matter. I think that would be a great conversation to have. I don't see how someone being a lesbian and being an advocate of Black lives, I don't see how those things are contradictory to each other. So I'd love to come back and have that conversation. But right now, we got to finish with topic number one. It's time to hit it and quit it. What I want to find out is whether we should hit it or quit it. And of course, the question here is whether the Black celebrities have the authority, have the juice to go out and speak out on these political issues. Hit it means yes, quit it means no. Pastor Gray, what do you think? Hit it or quit it? Should Black celebrities actually have the authority to speak up about these types of things?
It's not a blanket hit it because I think character, credibility, and receipts for the work are necessary components. You got to have the receipts for being out there and investing the time in the work and being an advocate and going about the business. And if you don't have the receipts and you are a celebrity, you need to sit that one out, maybe.
Charles Butler, hit it or quit it?
I'd say quit it unless you're a Denzel Washington or someone of that ilk, not a Samuel L. Jackson, an ex-crackhead. So my thing is with celebrities, Black celebrities, and any celebrity, these tend to be people that are very amoral in our society. Quit it.
Jeremiah Kamara, hit it or quit it? Black celebrities speaking out, yes or no?
Hit it and quit it. It all depends on the celebrity. If you know what you're talking about, you've done your research, you've done your homework, you're qualified, then go ahead and do it. But don't do it just because you can rap good or just because you can shoot a basketball. Right. Do it because you've shown yourself approved.
That's right.
Issue number two on the quit list, Freedom, Georgia. During the Great Migration, you guys remember that back in somewhere between 1920, 1970, 6 million African Americans moved from the South up to the North looking for a better life for themselves. Now, just recently, 19 families bought 97 acres of land in Georgia, and they wanted to create a safe haven, a city that was safe for Black people. Charles Butler, should Black people be migrating back to the South?
I think the South is a great place, and my roots are in the South. I mean, my dad came up from the South, came to Chicago after he got out of World War II, moved to Chicago. He said it's the most racist place he'd ever been. Went to Detroit, got hired in the plant, created a great life for his family. I love the South. I think the South is far more accepting of black folks than the North ever was, because they differentiated between black families and they didn't discriminate against you solely on the color of your skin. So the South gets a bad rap in a lot of cases. I mean, I was stationed down south in Meridian, Mississippi, where I was the only black officer on base. And I can tell you this, I got treated very poorly on the base by white folks from up north. And those people out in town, they rallied around me, white folks and black folks rallied around me and took care of me. That's what I can tell you. So going back down south, the reverse migration that's going on, I think is good for everybody, especially black people. And if you want to live around people who are like you, which I do, I don't mind living around black people who are like me, who are educated, who keep their lines up, who, you know, we have the same goals and objectives. But do I want to live around black people who are ghetto, who got 4 or 5 men running in and out of their bedroom every week? No, hell no. And I found that happening in Hyde Park in a school that my kid was in. And I said, I don't want my kid going to school with these kids. My kid don't get up and see 3 or 4 men running out of her daddy's bedroom, because these kids come to school talking about sex and a whole bunch of other stuff that kids their age ain't got no business talking about. Yes, I discriminate. Yes.
Pastor Gray, one of the reasons why these people are doing this is because they're looking for somewhere safe for black people. They're trying to escape the racism. Do you think America could ever be free of racism?
You know, if America came to grips with the social construct of whiteness and decidedly had a plan to, you'll never run away. It's like white flight. If you're going, just because a few black folk move into a neighborhood, you're going to keep running into the ends of the earth. And I think that we will never quite overcome it until there comes a reckoning with it, with regard to whiteness. Now, what is whiteness? Whiteness is not about this is not a pigmentation thing. I think in many ways you can be white and be as you can have melanin all going through your veins. What I'm suggesting is that it is a good thing. I relish my years at Morehouse. I spent 2.5 years down in Atlanta. I love my time at Morehouse. I appreciate that, but it is not a reality for when I came out. Now, when I came out of school, when I came out of Atlanta, I'm back in the world where I'm still a minority. But for those few years, that was definitely a wonderful thing. Now, if I translate that into this Freedom Georgia project, then I see this as something that can be helpful, that can be ameliorating to one's well-being, particularly in this moment that we're living in America. But I don't know if it's the answer for everything. But again, this is all projection because it's not even there yet. I mean, they just got the land. They still got to build the city. And I know they want to create it as something that's going to be a metropolis for people, a safe haven. But I look forward to seeing how it turns out.
Yeah, I think they want to create something very similar to Black Wall Street that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. What do you think of that, Jeremiah? Do you think that's feasible?
I mean, it's feasible, it's doable. I mean, America is very cautious of you having a nation within a nation. I don't want to have this same conversation 20 years ago, 20 years from now, if I'm here and talking about the migration back up north. So I don't want us to vacillate between going from the north to the south, back to the north, back to the south. And I don't think it's where you live, it's how you live.
Yep.
In terms of migrating to the south. Yeah, that's good if you have a plan. But if you don't have a plan, you're going back down doing the same thing. If you have a different paradigm, what are you going to do? You're going to go down there and you're going to pray harder. You're going to run into more churches. You're going to tithe more. What are you going to do? You got to have a plan.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you have millennials now that are on the computers. That's become the great equalizer. So no matter where you are, you can make money with that. But if wherever you go, you must have a plan. I've been here in Atlanta now for 25 years, but we came down here with the plan, and that plan has been put into place. But if you move somewhere and you don't have a plan, you're just moving because it's trendy or you heard somebody was doing it, just stay where you are because you'll be part of the problem.
I agree.
As we've been on the air, a guy named Roger hit me on the chat room and says, he said, I knew I like you, the house. Butler, of course, I was in the house.
Yeah.
Remember.
Now, and I just want to throw out one question. We've actually only got about 2 minutes left on the program, but I just want to throw out one question. Now, does it make sense for Black people, if Black people own their own stores, their own professional sports leagues, their own cleaners and car dealerships and banks. Would that make sense for black folk?
I want to chime in first. Can I get it? Can I hit it?
Go ahead.
Listen, for the last 12 years, I've been a professor teaching ancient languages. I teach Greek. I've taught it for the last 10 years. And what I've come to realize is that I think that that because we are in a moment when being one of the only black professors in a predominantly white school for all these years, I have come to realize that we do need to have some things that can address our absence. There's been an absconding. We've been absconded from occupying places at the table where we need to have our own things in many ways, because we've been so left out of this. We've been so written out. And I think that my advancement in my education, that is not just for me alone, it's for my two boys and for my community, to continue to press into where I pastor so that I can be an example for other people. And so in that sense, I think that there needs to be some things that we do create our own, whether it's be educational facilities or reconfiguring of the way in which we deliver education for a segment of society that has been looked out, left over, and dubbed the least of these. So yes, I do think we need to have a place where we can frame the conversation, where we can be in control of what is how the ethos or the overall the atmosphere is, and then we can begin to assert what we want to see have happen in our community if we're so committed to this community.
Okay, that's our time, folks, on this episode of The Quit List. As usual, we need to find out whether we should hit it or quit it. The question on issue number 2 is, was desegregation bad for black people? Hit it says yes, quit it says no. Pastor Gray, was desegregation bad?
No. Quit it. No. I don't believe it.
No.
Jeremiah Kamara.
Yes and no.
Okay. All right. Give me your 2-second version of why it's yes and no.
Well, you live in Chicago. You saw what happened during desegregation. The South Side was in control of things. And as soon as we integrated, what happened? So you see that. You're in Chicago. You're in the place where that great migration from Clarksdale, Mississippi to Chicago happened. And black folks were standing proud and having the South Side, with their own everything you just named.
Exactly.
As soon as integration hit. So in some areas it was bad. Some areas it was good. I can't just say totally, but I'm going to say
okay, there you have it, folks. That's it for this episode of The Quit List. I want to thank my guests. We've been joined today by Pastor Ernest Gray. Pastor Ernest Gray is the senior pastor at the Keystone Baptist Church. We thank you for being here. Mr. Charles Butler, the conservative talk show host, as usual. We appreciate you. We appreciate you, Jeremiah Kamara, the author and filmmaker. Great job, folks. We appreciate you guys. And we want you all to tune in next time right here on The Quit List. I'm Dr. Stan, the Quit Doctor.
Camped out at home for COVID? Join us, Indie TV, where you will see the talk shows, movies, drama, action, and comedy. Be the first and see it first. Sign up now for free at Indie TV.